The steak hits the pan and the whole kitchen goes quiet for a second. That sound, that hard, sharp hiss, is the only way you really know the pan's hot enough. Not a thermometer stuck in the meat, not a timer buzzing on the counter, just your ears telling you the truth before your eyes even catch up. Last week I stood in the meat aisle at the store downtown, and right next to me a fellow was talking about a steakhouse dinner he'd had the night before. $26 for one ribeye, just the steak. Not the potato, not the drink, not the 18% tip he said he left because the waiter kept his water glass full. I went home, pulled a $9 ribeye out of my own fridge, dropped it into a skillet that's older than my mother, and it came out better. Better crust, juicier middle. Didn't cost me a dime beyond the meat itself because I already had everything else I needed. So how does a 100-year-old pan beat a restaurant kitchen full of trained cooks and gas burners that cost more than my truck? Stick with me. The answer is simpler than you'd think, and it fits in the palm of your hand. My grandmother cooked every single steak my grandfather ate for over 40 years in that exact same skillet. Same pan, same stove, same two hands. She never owned a meat thermometer in her whole life, and she never once served him a steak that wasn't right. She'd press it with two fingers, feel how it gave back, and just know. I've tried explaining that trick to folks in town, and they look at me like I've made it up on the spot. I haven't. Your body knows more than you give it credit for, if you just slow down long enough to let it tell you something. Here's where I think a lot of folks are getting steered wrong lately. There's a video going around right now with millions of views, and it tells people to sear their steak for exactly 90 seconds a side, no more, no less, like you're running a science experiment instead of cooking supper. And I'll give credit where it's due. Timing does matter, and that video isn't lying to you outright. But here's what a stopwatch can't do. It can't tell you what your own pan is doing on your own stove, in your own kitchen, on a Tuesday night when the weather's different than it was yesterday. Every stove runs a little different. Every cut of meat has its own thickness, its own fat marbling, its own personality, if you want to call it that. If you're staring down at a timer instead of watching the meat itself, you're going to miss the exact second it's ready, and by the time you notice, it's already gone too far. I'm Ruth, and I cook the way my mother did, and the way her mother did before her, out of a farmhouse kitchen up in the hill country, with a set of cast iron that's been passed hand to hand longer than this house has had electric lights. My husband's Uncle Walt is the one who taught me how to properly season a skillet, back when I was just 15 years old, standing over his old wood-burning stove with a rag and a spoonful of bacon grease. He told me a pan will take care of you for the rest of your life, so long as you take care of it first. I think about that every single time I cook. By the time we're finished today, you're going to know exactly how to get that deep, dark, steakhouse-style crust in your own kitchen. You'll know why resting the meat matters more than almost anybody admits out loud, and you'll know how to read a steak with your own two hands instead of relying on a gadget from the store. If you want all of this written down, plus my grandmother's dry rub recipe that she never once wrote on paper herself, I've put together a free little guide, and it's linked right below this video for you. Now let's talk about picking the right cut, because this matters more than people think, and nobody online ever slows down to explain it properly. A ribeye works beautifully because it's got fat running all through the muscle, not just around the edge, and that fat is what bastes the meat from the inside while it cooks. A strip steak works too, leaner, a little firmer bite, good if you like more chew to your meat. What you want to avoid if you're new to this is anything thinner than an inch. A thin steak cooks through before your crust ever gets the chance to form properly, and you end up with gray meat and no char at all, which is a real disappointment after you've gone through the trouble. Now here's the part that actually matters, and it's not complicated once somebody explains it plainly. That deep brown crust you're paying extra money for at a restaurant comes from something food scientists call the Maillard reaction. That's just a fancy way of saying the sugars and the proteins sitting right on the surface of the meat turn brown and turn flavorful the second they hit real high heat. It's the exact same reason a piece of toast tastes better and richer than a plain slice of bread. Your pan has to be hot enough to make that happen fast before the inside of the steak has a chance to overcook. That's the whole secret sitting right there. Heat and not being scared of it. Start by pulling your steak out of the refrigerator a good 30 minutes before it ever touches the pan. Cold meat dropped into a hot pan cooks unevenly, and what you'll end up with is a thick gray ring sitting right under the crust, instead of pink color running all the way through to the center. While it's sitting out, take a paper towel and pat it dry, and I mean really dry, like you're drying off a plate fresh out of the dish rack. Wet meat steams in a hot pan instead of searing properly, and steam is the enemy of a good crust every single time. Salt it heavy, more than feels comfortable to you at first, right before it goes into the pan, not hours ahead of time like some folks will tell you. Get your cast iron ripping hot over high heat for a solid 3 minutes, completely empty, nothing in it yet. You'll see a thin curl of smoke lift up off the surface, and that's your signal that it's ready. Drop in a spoonful of tallow or another hard fat with a high smoke point. Not butter yet, because butter burns and turns bitter too fast at this kind of heat. Lay the steak down into the pan, pointing away from your body, so any splashing fat lands away from you instead of on your arm. And then here's the hardest part for most people. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Don't peek underneath it. Don't slide it around the pan out of nervousness. Let it sit there undisturbed for a good 3 to 4 minutes, depending on how thick your cut is. You'll hear that steady hiss the entire time, low and constant, like a kettle just starting to think about boiling. When it's finally ready to flip, the steak will let go of the pan on its own, easy, with no sticking and no tearing at the crust. Flip it just the once. Drop in a real spoonful of butter now, along with a couple of garlic cloves you've smashed flat with the side of your knife, and a sprig of fresh thyme if you've got some growing out by the porch steps. Tilt the pan slightly toward you and spoon that melted, foaming butter back over the top of the steak, over and over, for another 3 minutes or so. That's called basting, and it's exactly how restaurant kitchens get that glossy shine and that extra depth of flavor without ever drying the meat out in the process. Pull the steak off the heat a little before you think it's actually done. This is the step almost everybody rushes past. The steak keeps right on cooking for several minutes after it leaves the pan, purely from the heat that's still trapped down inside the meat itself. Set it on a clean plate and let it rest, untouched, for a full 5 to 7 minutes before you ever put a knife to it. I know waiting feels impossible when the whole kitchen smells the way it does right about now, but cut into it too early and every bit of that juice runs straight out onto your cutting board instead of staying locked inside the meat where it belongs. While that steak's resting quietly on the counter, let's talk real numbers, because this is where the actual savings show up, and I think it matters more than most cooking videos let on. That steakhouse ribeye I mentioned earlier ran $26 before you even add tax, before the tip, before the gas money it took to drive there and back. My butcher counter ribeye, cooked right here at home in my own kitchen, ran $9 total, and I already owned the skillet, so there wasn't a single extra cost beyond the meat itself. Do the math on that difference twice a month instead of eating out, and you're looking at more than $400 staying in your pocket over the course of a single year. That's not pinching pennies for the sake of it. That's just cooking smart and eating just as well, maybe even better. I want to pause here and tell you about one more thing that changed how I cook, if you'll let me. There's a small community I've been part of for a few years now, other folks who cook the old-fashioned way, trading recipes and tricks the way my grandmother used to trade them over a fence line with the neighbor. If that sounds like something you'd enjoy being part of, there's a link down below where you can find it. No pressure at all, just an open door in case you're looking for one. So here's the whole method, wrapped up simple, the way I'd explain it to my own daughter standing next to me at the stove. Let your meat come up to room temperature before it ever sees the pan. Dry it off completely, more than feels necessary. Get your skillet smoking hot before the meat touches it at all. Leave it alone while it sears, no matter how tempting it is to check underneath. Baste it in real butter once you've flipped it. And let it rest before you cut, no matter how good it smells sitting there on the counter. That's the entire secret that restaurants don't particularly want you thinking about while you're paying their prices for it. This weekend, before Sunday supper comes around, I want you to try just one thing different from how you'd normally cook. Don't go out and buy a new pan. Don't go looking for some special cut of meat. Just dry your steak off longer than you're used to doing and make yourself wait that extra 30 seconds before you flip it over. That's the whole assignment. One small habit, and it changes more than most folks expect it to. Now, I want to hear from you down in the comments because I read every single one of them. When you were coming up, did your family sear their steak in cast iron the way mine did? Or did somebody in your house swear up and down that the grill was the only right way to do it? Tell me which one it was, and tell me who taught you to cook it that way. I'm always curious how these old habits get passed down differently from one kitchen to the next. Next time, I'm going to show you exactly how my grandmother turned the drippings left behind in this very same skillet into a gravy rich enough to make you forget the meat was even the main event. Until then, just remember this. It was never really about the pan. It's about the patience you're willing to give it.